Hi everyone, my name is Ann Ellis and I am the Children, Youth and Family Minister at Mount Seymour United Church in North Vancouver. And I would like to welcome you to our gathering video for the weekend of September 26th, 2021. Today we're going to be talking about Orange Shirt Day and the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. This is a difficult topic for some people to engage in, and so I have provided some resources for support in the description below. Before we begin, let's just take a moment and breathe. Settle our hearts and settle our minds. And know that once there was somebody who did such amazing things and told such wonderful stories that people just had to follow him. And when they asked him who he was, he said, "I am a light in this world." And he also said, "You, my beloveds, are lights in this world. Let your light shine everywhere you go and illumine all of creation. You, my beloveds, are lights in this world." Mount Seymour United Church is located on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Tsleil-Waututh people. And they have been stewards of this land from time immemorial. They've watched over the land and the sea and the mountains, the birds and the trees and the butterflies. And we owe them a debt of gratitude and thanks for their stewardship and care of this land. And we owe them thank yous for us living, working, and playing on this land. Here at Mount Seymour United Church, you are welcome. The welcome that we extend is as broad and deep as we can make it. You are welcome here if you are coming to Sunday services, or if you are still staying at home, you are welcome here. You are welcome here, whatever your vaccination status, your marital status, your financial background. You are welcome here, whatever your sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. You are welcome here. You are welcome here if you call yourself a Christian, or if you are part of another faith tradition or religion. And you are welcome here if you don't follow any religion at all and are simply curious. We welcome all who seek the ideals of justice, peace, and compassion. You are welcome here. Orange Shirt Day and the Day for Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th. We wear orange shirts. Why do we wear orange shirts? We wear orange shirts because once, when the residential schools were still in operation, a little girl named Phyllis Jack Webstad wore an orange shirt to her first day. Her grandmother had bought her shiny orange shirt. But that shirt was taken away from her, and she was not allowed to wear it. And so the orange shirt has become a symbol of all that was taken away from the children that were sent to the residential schools. For us, Canadians who are non-Indigenous people, I think it's very hard for us to understand what it would have been like to be forced into a residential school as a child. Most of us have no idea what it would be like to be forced away from our families, to not be allowed to speak the language that we know, and have to live somewhere where the language spoken is one we don't know, and not be allowed to leave. Today, I have a story for you that I think will help us to understand a little bit more about what it was like at the residential schools. This book is called Shin-Chi's Canoe. Are you ready to hear the story?
Shin-Chi's Canoe by Nicola Campbell. Pictures by Kim Lefebvre. The morning sun was shining so bright, Shishieko had to squint. She was on her way back to the Indian residential school, and this year she wasn't alone. Shin-Chi, her younger brother, was coming too. Yaya, Mom, Dad, baby Shilteko, Shin-Chi, and Shishieko were sitting together on the porch, waiting for the cattle truck that would soon pick them up. Dad, it'll be summertime when we come home. Can you please build us a dugout canoe of our own? Shin-Chi said. My children, don't you like paddling with me anymore? Their dad said as he pulled them close. We love paddling with you, Shishieko said. But we're getting way too old, and I need to learn how to paddle all alone, said Shin-Chi, who was 6 years old. Last year, on her first day at the Indian residential school, Shishieko had been punished because she could not understand the English words. Then they cut her long braids and threw them away and washed her head with kerosene. And so that morning, before the sun rise, Shishieko asked, Yaya, can you cut our hair today? Afterwards, Shin-Chi, Shishieko, and Yaya went up the mountain to put their braids away. When the cattle truck arrived, their dad tucked a tiny canoe into Shishieko's hand. My children, their mom said, with tears in her eyes, if we could, we would keep you here at home. We would never ever let you go, but it's the laws that force us to send you away to residential school. Yaya squeezed them tight. They could hardly breathe. We'll be waiting for you to come home, she said. Then Shin-Chi and Shishieko climbed into the back of the cattle truck with all the children from the Indian reservation. Dust came in waves, getting in their eyes and in their noses until they could hardly breathe. It followed the truck like a snake all along the valley. My Shin-Chi, we will not see our family until the sockeye salmon return. These are the things you must always remember, Shishieko said, gesturing to the trees, mountains, and river below. At night, when you go to sleep, remember the tug of the fish when you and Dad pulled the nets in and we made smoked and wind-dried salmon. Shin-Chi could not help himself. He looked at everything, the mountain with the trail that led to the caves, the deer in the field by their house. He memorized every fishing spot and place where he had caught the great big frog, the grasshoppers, and the crickets, and the slugs, until the rattle and bump of the cattle truck rocked him to sleep. Shin-Chi was dreaming when he heard Shishieko say, It's time to wake up now, my Shin-Chi. When he opened his eyes, it was dusk, and all he could see was the dark silhouette of a church steeple. Remember, my English name is Mary. Your English name is David. And don't forget, we aren't allowed to talk to each other until next June." Shishi Echo gave him the tiny canoe that their father had made. "This, my Shinchi, is for you. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, be careful to keep it hidden." When they got off the truck, the priests and sisters said, "Juniors and intermediates, stand single file in separate lines. Boys, stand here. Girls, stand over there." Then single file, they marched inside. That night, in the junior girls' wing, Shishieko wondered if her Shinchi was okay. He was used to sleeping near his sisters. He had never slept alone. Down the hall in the junior boys' wing, Shinchi lay awake in bed. He held his tiny canoe safely in his hands. The sweet scent of cedar smelled just like his dad. Dad said the spring salmon come up the river first, then the sockeye come in the summertime. That's when we can go home again. Finally, he drifted off to sleep. They went to Mass once each day. That's where they learned how to pray. For half the day they worked, the other half they went to school. The girls did the cooking, cleaning, knit mittens and scarves, and they laundered and sewed everyone's clothes. The boys learned how to farm, do carpentry and blacksmithing, and 3 times a day all the children went outside to play in the wind, rain, hail, or snow. In the dinner hall, the boys and the girls sat on opposite sides of the room. Brothers and sisters were not allowed to talk to one another. They made up a sign language to say hi or I miss you. For breakfast, the children ate porridge and burnt toast. Through the doors, they could see their teachers carrying steaming plates of bacon, eggs, and potatoes from the farm. For lunch, they ate thin soup, and dinner was hard buns with stew. For dinner, the teachers ate meat, vegetables, and corn, and the children were never given enough food. When autumn was over and winter arrived, the days were short and the weather cold. Shinchi was lonely and he was hungry. He missed his mom, his dad, and Aya. He missed Shishieko and the baby Shulteko too. He snuck out of the back door and ran to the river nearby his school. He stood there with his tiny dugout canoe. Shinji could not help himself. He looked at everything. He listened to each crystal snowflake that danced down from the sky and fell on his face. He breathed the cool breath of winter until the land was covered in a blanket of fresh snow. Finally, when eagle song echoed through the valley, traveling just beyond reach, he sang his grandfather's prayer song, and his voice echoed from mountain peak to mountain peak. Shinchi placed his canoe in the river, knowing the current would carry it safely home. Then Shinchi made a friend. His English name was John. Little mischief times 2, they learned how to steal food. In the orchards they found apples, in the root cellar carrots and potatoes. To their delight, one day they discovered preserved cherries, only to realize they had black olives instead. Early one morning, when spring had finally set in, Shishieko snuck down to the river. To her surprise, she heard her grandfather's song. Her Shinchi was there with a fishing line. "I'm checking to see if the sockeye salmon are here," he said, in deep concentration. "Not yet, my Shinchi, but they will come." When the sockeye finally swam up the river, the dust rose around the cattle truck. like a great big butterfly that followed them all the way home. Shinchi could hardly wait. Shishi Echo, he asked over and over again, how much longer till we get home? Little mischief, you. We'll get there soon, Shishi Echo said, with sparkles in her eyes. When the cattle truck arrived at last, their mother and Aya ran to greet them. Oh, my grandchildren, we missed you, Aya said, squeezing them tight. Your dad is in the woodshed, said Mom, as she hugged them too. This time she had tears of happiness in her eyes. Shishi Echo and Shinchi ran as fast as they could all the way to the woodshed. There they found their dad carving them their very own dugout canoe.
So I wonder what it would feel like to be forced away from your family. And I wonder what it would feel like to not be able to speak the language that you knew, and not be able to speak to a sibling just sitting across the room from you. And I wonder what it would be like to never have enough food. And I wonder what we can do in response to this story. For a long time, most of the non-Indigenous people in Canada didn't know what was happening at the residential schools. And most of us, including myself, didn't even know they existed, which is very strange in this day and age, because there's been a lot of work done to educate Canada about the residential school system in the last 20 years. Once people started sharing the stories about how scared and sad the children were at these schools, Canada started the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. These are big words that mean they were going to take the time to listen to the truth of what happened at the residential schools, and take the time to hear each and every story of anyone who wanted to share. And then, after hearing all the stories, figure out how we can say sorry. We can't change the past, but we can make a better future. The people that shared stories at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission created a document called the Calls to Action. And this one has been specifically drafted so that it is in language that is easier for children to understand. And I've put a link to this document in the description below. It's a long document. I'm not going to read all of it today, but I am going to share with you the calls to action specifically designed for churches, because most of the residential schools were run by churches, including the United Church of Canada. So calls to action number 48 and calls to action number 49 read, we call on the churches that were part of the Indian Residential Schools Settlement Agreement to adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I've put some links to those documents and information in the description below. And we call on all churches and religious groups in Canada to acknowledge that Aboriginal people never gave up their lands and that Europeans did not discover Canada. Calls to action 58 through 61. We call on the Pope the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, to say sorry for the church-run residential schools and for all the children who were treated unfairly and hurt at these schools. The Pope should travel to Canada to say sorry in person. We call on all churches who were part of the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement to educate their followers about their church's role in residential schools and why saying sorry is important. We call on all the churches who are part of the residential school system to work with Aboriginal people, to teach their priests and ministers and other leaders about Aboriginal peoples and cultures, including residential schools and Aboriginal spirituality. We call on all churches who are part of the Indian residential school system to pay for Aboriginally held reconciliation projects, like projects to help Aboriginal people to heal, or projects to help Aboriginal languages grow. These calls to action are why we say a land acknowledgement every week here at the church, to remind us that there were people on this land from time immemorial, and they have been here living in Canada well before any of us who may have come from Europe or from Asia or from Africa or anywhere else on the planet to this continent. And it's also why we created the display outside of our church with the children figures wearing orange shirt that say "Every child matters." It's why I'm making a video today to help you to understand a little bit more about the history of the residential schools and our place in it as the United Church of Canada. For a long time in Canada, Indigenous children didn't matter. They were taken from their families, and some of them never came home again. It's not easy to think about children dying away from their families in a residential school. And I do not have the right words to express how much that hurts me, how much grief I feel for the families that lost their children and never saw them again. Again, if this is hard for you to hear, I've included some resources for support in the description below. This week, our prayer wall ribbons are orange. Last week they were green, and we invited everyone to share their celebrations and be united in the things that we celebrate. This week, we honor the fact that sometimes in life there is sorrow, and there is grief, and there is lament. And so the orange ribbons are an invitation to share a loss that you wish to honor. This past week, my husband's uncle died unexpectedly. And I am so very sad. And sadness can make you feel very alone. And so for my ribbon this week, I've put his name on my ribbon as a way to honor him and to honor the loss that my family is feeling right now. Sharing that here on the prayer wall and with all of you helps me to feel less alone. So take some time and think about things that you've lost over this last year. And then come down to our prayer wall, write it on an orange ribbon, and share it so that we know that we are united and we are together and we are not alone. We have each other and we have God. Thank you so much for being with me this week, and I look forward to seeing you next week for our next video. Bye.